Welcome to the Martin Bailey Photography Podcast. It's December 21, 2015, and this is episode 502. I recently sat down with my friend Ibarionex Perello and recorded a great conversation about where he is in his photography as he lays down some challenges for himself to take his photography to a new level. And today I'm going to share that conversation with you. Ibarionex Perello is a Los Angeles-based photographer, writer, and host and producer of the Candid Frame Photography Podcast. He has over 25 years of experience in the photographic industry, and his work has appeared in numerous publications including Outdoor Photographer, Digital Photo Pro, Rangefinder, Popular Photography, and Photoshop User magazines. He has authored over 5 books, including Chasing the Light, Improving Your Photography Using Available Light. And Ibarionex's podcast, The Candid Frame, has been running for over 9 years now. And he's spoken to some of the industry's most amazing photographers, including Elliot Irwitt, Dan Winters, Mary Ellen Mock, and many, many others. He has served as an adjunct professor at the Art Center College of Design, and he's currently working as a production fellow for Maximum Fun, which produces NPR's Bullseye with Jesse Thorne. We were communicating recently, and Ibarionex happened to mention that his photography was going through some interesting changes, so we set a time to sit down and talk, with nothing planned other than to discuss this in depth. The result is an hour-long conversation that covers a lot of ground, and I really hope that you enjoy this as much as I did. Okay, so Ibarionex, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Martin. Always good to talk to you, man.
You too. You know, that voice when it comes across, we've been friends for 9 years or so now, and it shouldn't surprise me, but when that voice comes across Skype, it's like I'm sitting here listening to a late night radio show and everything just seems to be okay.
Thank you.
We're going to have a conversation today. We've got one thing that we mentioned we were going to talk about. We were talking over email, and you mentioned that you'd had a few changes, some fun stuff going off in your photography life. So we're going to talk about that, and then that's it, really. So we're just going to be just talking, a couple of friends having a conversation, and I'm sure we're going to enjoy it, and I hope the listeners will too. But tell me, what's happening with your photography? What are you up to these days?
Well, before we get started there, I just wanted to congratulate you.
Yeah.
I missed your anniversary show, and I wanted to say that I am so happy that you're still around, that you continue to put out what I think is one of the best photography shows that are out there. I mean, there have been a lot that have come and gone since then, since the beginning, and I think yours is an exceptional show.
Oh, thanks very much.
You provide an incredible amount of information, and that goes without saying. But I've always enjoyed the sincerity and the generosity with which you have put this stuff out there. And I think that's one of the reasons why you have proven so successful, not only in terms of your podcast, but also in terms of what you do, what you've done in terms of your business as a photographer. So I'm really proud to see you do that, and I'm even prouder that we're friends.
That's amazing. Thanks very much, Ibarionex. I'm proud of the fact that we're friends as well, and it's been a long time. I mean, your own podcast, people will know you from the Candid Frame, but I think that whole I could just say right back at you for all of that, because you've been doing your podcast for pretty much as long as I have, and you. What are you at? I mean, you've just gone over 300 or so, right? Because I know you've had a few times when you've not released every week, but I mean, you provide so much incredible information, and the people that you get to talk to just astounds me. You know, you've spoken with some really big names in the industry, and so it's always a pleasure listening to your podcast as well. You know, but thank you very much. I really appreciate the sentiment, and it was we saw you. We were in the hangout having a chat, and we saw your icon. I know that you tried to get in, but didn't quite pull it off. But it was really nice to at least see your icon anyway. And thanks for those lovely kind words there.
But in terms of answering your question, it may sound a little, I don't know what the right word is for it, but when I mentioned to you there have been a lot of changes to my photography, it's not been so much what I've been shooting
Mm,
or or even how I've been shooting. I mean that latter does play a role,
mm,
but it's been really interesting to be really aware of where I'm at in my head when I'm shooting, and that has resulted in a big difference.
mm,
And part of that is a result of teaching. I've been teaching at two places. I've been teaching at the Los Angeles Center of Photography here in Los Angeles, and I've also been teaching at the Arcanum.
mm,
One of the things about doing that is that I've been having to sort of talk to people about process,
mm,
about the process of what I do when I'm out there shooting, and I've had to verbalize it and repeat it in a way that I normally don't have to.
mm.
Normally, I just go out and shoot, but when you're having to explain someone the way you do things, it makes you very um, self-conscious isn't the word, but it makes you um, that much more aware of everything you're doing from soup to nuts.
Yeah.
And and I started observing what was going on with me when I was going out and shooting, what would lead me to make the choices that I made as a photographer.
Mm,
And because I was feeling a little frustrated at uh, with what I was doing, and I started observing what I was doing, and I realized that a big part of it was this fear thing. And I've talked about fear a couple of times
mm,
on the podcast, but I would go because I'm a street photographer for people who don't know. So I would go out there and I would recognize how this anxiety would come up in me, this fear would come up in me.
mm,
And so much of it would sort of dictate when I would raise the camera or when I would choose not to raise the camera,
mm.
how close I would choose to be, how long I would linger in a space. And while I was doing all these things that I was sharing with other people about being aware of the light, about owning the frame, about being aware of what's happening at the periphery of your frame, things like that,
Mm,
um, I started being really aware about how I was feeling at a given moment
mm.
and getting to the point where I would recognize those anxieties and fears, but not allow them to dictate what I would do or not do.
I
And I
see.
would move, and I would just sort of move past that. I'm going, okay, I want to photograph this person who's over here. I'm feeling this anxiety about doing it, and sometimes that would prevent me from doing it. But it was
Mm,
like, okay, I'm feeling this, but go ahead, just keep doing it. And if an issue comes up, you'll just deal with it.
mm.
And I I being finding myself to being a little more liberated about that, not allowing those feelings to dictate what I chose to do or not do.
Mm.
Um, and as a result, I've been able to sort of explore what I do with the camera in a very different way. Um, I've been able to create images that I don't think I would have been able to make even just a year ago.
Wow.
And I think it's really interesting. It's not just about not wanting to avoid conflict with people. I think that's never been a real big issue for me.
Mm,
Um, I think I have a really good sort of persona when I'm out there on the street. I'm very positive. I'm very enthusiastic, and for the most part, I'm always able to diffuse any situation if people have an issue with me pointing a camera in their direction. And I have techniques that you know. Make people think that I'm taking a picture of something else other than them, and all those things that a street photographer sort of does.
Mm.
But um, what was really just different for me was just that 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 awareness of what was happening inside of me
Mm.
uh, really just allowed me to make very different choices. And I think I was still early on in this process because I was taking when you asked me to submit images to you, I was taking a look at them, and I liked the images that I produced over the last um, couple of months.
Mm.
Uh, but I felt like God, I feel like there's a benchmark. There's a threshold that I'm trying to hit,
Mm.
and I haven't felt like that in a long time.
Yeah.
So while it's good, while a lot of people like the pictures, I feel like I'm on this sort of upswing to hitting some sort of mark, and I'm not sure exactly what that mark is.
Mm.
And feel as I'm shooting that I'm moving somewhere new, that I'm moving somewhere different. So when I told you about this new thing in my photography, it's really this journey that I'm experiencing, which I really can't define and point to in a photograph and saying, "Oh, this is what I'm doing differently."
Mm.
Just really aware of what's happening inside of me and seeing the images changing.
Mm.
What that is going to be in terms of an end result, I don't know yet.
Wow. So, I mean, there are so many things there that I want to touch on. Not sure that I'll be able to do it quite in a logical order, but you started there talking about the way teaching has helped your own photography, and this is something that I found from the start, even with the podcast. The podcast has always been for me a way of teaching, a way of helping people with their own photography through my own experiences. And I've found that I just in the act of going through in my mind, I podcasted about this with the mental checklist a few weeks ago, but I started to go through what I was going to say in the podcast while I was making the photographs in the field, and I found myself correcting problems in my photographs before I made them, and just the act of trying to think through logically how I was going to explain a certain technique or process helped me to refine that process. And I think that that's probably related to what you were saying there, because in having to explain verbally to people what you're doing and how and why you're doing things, it really does make you think and question your own processes. Because, I mean, we do a lot of things just by pretty much naturally. We've got the muscle memories there. We don't have to think about a lot of the stuff that we do. But
Mhm.
then when you need to tell that to someone else, all of a sudden it's like you start questioning yourself. You start questioning your own processes. So I think that that's probably a part of. I'm really just repeating what you're saying, but I've definitely had that myself, and feel as though that is a big part in our growth as photographers.
Yeah, I'm going to release a video about an image that I made recently.
Mm.
I was walking down the street, and I was out for lunch, so I only had a finite period of time before I
Mm.
had to get back to the studio.
Mm.
And I'm always with my camera. I'm never without a camera.
Mm.
And I'm walking down the street, and I see these red chairs behind the storefront window.
Mm.
So just a row of four red plastic chairs.
Mm.
And my initial images are of that pattern, and then I start going, and then that's not enough. And then I wait for people to sort of pass by, and that's not really working. And then I get further and further back, and I start including more things in the frame. I start including part of the skyline. Start including an alleyway. I start including the sidewalk. I'm playing around as different people are walking within the frame, and it's like I think I made like about 30 or 40 images.
Mm.
And then I just started making all these sort of micro changes within the frame, like shifting a little to the left, a
Mm.
little to the right, and including a little more sky. Just experimenting because I was trying to figure out in that process, how can I make this work?
Mm.
I had a gut feeling, okay, there's a potential here for something.
Mm.
right? And I think I spent a good amount of time just sort of building the frame,
Mm,
and the rest of it was waiting for just the right element to walk into the frame to help sort of complete it.
mm.
And I came away with one shot that I was pretty pleased with, but I could have stayed there for another hour.
Yeah, these damn lunch breaks, they're so short.
Right. But what I enjoyed about that was that whole process
Mm,
of slowly sort of building this shot and being aware that I was as conscious as I was of every single element within that frame. That I was so in that moment.
mm,
I mean, I did have the pressure of, okay, I'm on the clock now. I'm going to have to get back.
mm.
But given that, the fact that I was so present, so hypersensitive to all these different elements and how they were playing together,
Mm.
and how I just knew that I just need that one thing to really complete that, and the fact that I was that conscious,
Yeah.
uh, that was really thrilling in that moment. The picture that I have, I think, is good, you know, uh, but it doesn't match the experience that I was having. It,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
didn't culminate in that moment where everything just paid off beautifully.
Mm.
Um,
Is this the red bench that in one of the photos that you sent? Or
um, I don't know if I included it in the
yeah.
quick
There's
section.
there's one there's one with a red bench with some fallen, looks like maple leaves, all on
Well,
the ground.
that I was at PIX, the PIX event in Seattle.
Ah,
Uh,
okay. It
in,
says pics on there, so it may be it.
yeah, so I
Yeah.
was doing a presentation there, and I was doing a photo walk with another street photographer, Renzi Ruiz,
Mm,
and I was just walking people through the process of how I find a scene.
mm,
And we were walking, and there was this structure to this building, and I felt, oh, look how the light hits there. So we sort of moved in that direction.
mm,
And underneath this sort of passageway was this scene with the bench and the leaves.
mm,
And so I'm talking out loud to these people about, oh, I see this bench at the end, and I start moving in, and I tell them how I'm starting to take that scene apart.
mm,
And my initial shots included some of the trees with the bench being in the middle of the frame or at the bottom of the frame.
mm,
Just telling them how, oh, there's all these distracting elements in the far distance. So I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to get rid of. And then I just bring the camera down,
mm,
putting the bench near the top end of the frame,
mm.
and then I see the shot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this was one of those times where I was talking out loud about the process.
Mm,
And then when I saw that particular composition, I got really excited because I was like, there's the shot.
yeah. Yeah.
But it was just like what we were talking about. It was just about, there are a lot of photographers who are listening to this who know what this feeling is.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're exploring a scene, and it's not about being frustrated. It's not about being goal oriented in terms of trying to make a shot. It's about that moment when you see something and you feel something in your gut.
Mm,
It's not necessarily that you're seeing the photograph, but you're sensing the potential of that moment, that space, uh, and you're going, "Wow, there's something here."
yeah.
And if I can get out of the way of it,
Mm,
I'll be able to make a really interesting photograph.
mm. You
And
know, yeah, sorry.
no, no, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I totally relate with the idea of working a scene and trying to sort of improve. Each frame has to feel like it's either going to be better or it's going to be worse. But I think that when it's better, you're moving in the right direction. When it's worse, you certainly still benefit from that because you're moving in the wrong direction. So it's they both give you information. Um, but I think the act of working a scene in that way is a really valuable thing to do as well. What I find is a great shame is sometimes people can, and probably myself too, walk up to a scene, you see something, you say, "Oh yeah, there's the shot," and you just bang and you walk on. And I don't think that works. Sometimes it does. Sometimes the shot presents itself to you, and that's it. But I think there's always value in working a scene a little bit more and trying to pull out more. And like you said, you might compose it with something along the top. You might tilt the camera down. There's a lot of things that the perspective and the wide angle lens tends to distort things and brings the foreground further forward, and you've got a whole bunch of stuff that you can do as you change your focal length or your camera position. And I think that it really does help to improve your photography to continue to search for that while you're working any scene. And that there's a whole bunch of things that we do, and I think that there comes a point when a certain amount of it becomes automatic. But I think that's also dangerous in that if you allow the totally automatic you to just rule the process, then you can sometimes walk away before you get what could have been a better photograph. And so, I think that kind of comes back to what you're saying about the situation that you're in at the moment, where you feel as though you're on the upswing. That that I really can relate to that as well.
I mean, I've been in this place before, but I think that my practice of photography is changing in the fact that I feel myself building my photographs. I think I went from taking photographs to making photographs, and now I'm building them. And I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah, because I'm finding. I think Sam Abel talks about finding the setting, and that's really. And you take a look at his photographs, just fantastic photographs.
Oh yeah.
But he talks about finding the setting a lot, and I haven't had the opportunity to take his workshops, but I have broken bread with him and talked to him, and he brings a very sort of Zen sort of attitude to his photography.
Yeah, it's beautiful work without a doubt.
Beautiful work, and when you take a look at some of that you just go, Jesus, how do you build that? And now I understand what it takes, and it's kind of a little bit misleading when you think about street photography, because the sort of the image people have is someone just pounding the shoe leather, and snapping pictures of things happen around them. And I found that I've done that, and my hit rate is pretty low. I get very lucky. But this way of working in the same environment, under the same sort of circumstances and conditions, is allowing me to sort of put together all these disparate elements and really shape them into something that at 250th or 500th of a second really works. Really works, and I like the challenge of that.
Yeah.
And it's making the photography really, really fun. And one of the things I should say about it is that the photography that I've been doing as of late has all been within really finite periods of time. Working on helping to produce an NPR show called Bullseye. So that's has me under contract for a year. And so it's a 9 to 5 gig. So when I go out and photograph, it's during my lunch breaks or during my breaks. So I got an hour for lunch, and I got like 15 minutes during the breaks. So my photography is happening during that finite period of time each day during the work.
Wow.
Yeah,
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so it's not like I have these 2 or 3 hours I'm going out to shoot. But now with the time change, the light's gone by about 4:30. Time I get work at 5:30, the light's all gone. So I don't have that much of a window of opportunity to go out to make some pictures. But that being said, I'm enjoying the limitation and the fact that I know, okay, I've got 15 minutes. What can I find within that 15 minutes? And I think for probably 70%, 75% of the time, I'm able to find something that I'm pleased with. That's good. It's not, I wouldn't say it's the greatest photography I've ever done, but I feel like I've succeeded in doing what I've just described to you in terms of getting out of my head enough to be aware of what's happening, about putting together these elements in terms of light, in terms of color, in terms of tone, in terms of gesture, in terms of the presence of people or not the presence of people, and make a photograph that that's really interesting visually. That is a great. It's basically an exercise for me every day.
Mm.
Not so much the can I. It's not so much. Oh, can I come away with a great photograph? That's not what I'm trying to do. If it happens, fantastic.
Mm.
But it's when I'm able to get into that space where I can put the pieces together. I mean, basically, I can no. Let me rephrase that. I can recognize a scene,
Mm.
take it apart like something out of the Matrix. Where all these individual pieces are separated, and I can suddenly bring them back together in a way that makes sense within the context of the frame.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty powerful stuff. Yeah. I and listening to you there, I'm wondering if, the pressure of those lunch breaks. I know that you mentioned, how you've only got this finite amount of time. And I wonder if limitations being placed on your photography are helping you in some way. It's like you hear people will talk about things like using a only using a 50 millimeter, or placing some kind. I know that David Duchamp does this as well,
Mhm.
but place a limitation on your photography, even if it's just for the sake of an exercise, and it forces you to become more creative within those limitations. And I think that it sounds as though you're getting those from the limitation of working in these lunch breaks and 15 minutes, or the very short amounts of time that you're working within.
Yeah, I mean, it makes a huge difference. And I'm working really simply. I'm either most of the time now I'm using the Samsung NX500,
Mm,
and that's the camera I'm going out there. I also have a Fuji X100S, but for the most part, I'm using the Samsung, and either using a kit lens, which is like an 18 to 55 or something along that line.
mm.
And usually, I'm shooting at the equivalent of 28 to 35 millimeters.
Oh wow, yeah.
So that's the focal length range that I'm working at because I really have been pushing myself to shoot more wide angle to include more within the frame
Mm,
and work so tightly. So that's also a factor in the limitation there. But yeah, I think that all those things in terms of time, in terms of the limited kit that I'm working with the focal length range I'm limiting myself to, all of that stuff
mm.
is having an influence in terms of how I'm seeing and how I'm shooting and the images that are the result.
Mm, mm. That reminds me of the conversation we had years ago on the focus ring, when we were talking about something that you mentioned earlier, which is the fear and apprehension
Mhm.
of photographing people. And I just sort of joked that if I was to do street photography, it would probably with my 600 millimeter, so that I can keep the
Yeah.
distance between me and the person. But those 28 to 35, I mean, that obviously, if you're going to photograph people, that means you do have to get up close. And I still really haven't. I don't do enough street photography throughout the year to even build up any kind of immune system to that apprehension.
Mhm.
I remember a few weeks ago. This year, I've started playing with an old medium format film camera that I threw over my shoulder one day when my wife and I were going to go into town, and we were going to have a walk around. We were going to do a little bit of shopping, but we were also going to have a walk in a park. And in that park, there was a woman sitting in a kimono at the edge of a traditional Japanese garden reading a book. And next to her, sitting on the grass, was probably her husband, in just regular clothes, and a kid. And I thought, oh, geez, look at that. That's a photograph right there. And the fear just got hold of me, and sort of I walked past, and I thought, I really want to shoot that, but how do I go about it? And I ended up walking away from it. It was like the fear won. And it was partly because my wife was there, and it was supposed to be just a bit of a walk in the park, but I should have gone back. And as I walked away, I was kicking myself. And for me, that fear and apprehension of actually approaching people is still very strong, and it stopped me getting a photograph. And those are the sort of photographs that, in nature, it's something that you fail to shoot at the right time. You see something, you don't stop the car. You think, oh, I'll shoot that on the way home, and then you go on the way home, the light's totally different, it looks like crap. So you get these images in your head that haunt you. But now I've got this one of this woman in the kimono, and I mean, it might have been so stereotypical that it wouldn't have worked, but I still would have loved to at least have shot it, and the fear won on that occasion. So,
Yeah.
um, you know,
And there have been many days where I'm at the office, right, and I go, oh, I need to get this stuff done.
mm,
And I'll take my break and I'll just slog through this stuff.
mm,
And then, and the days that I've gone out there, I said, no, go out, take your 15 minutes and go out and find something to photograph. And those days I've come away with feeling very gratified that I took that time and went out to make the photograph.
mm,
I think
yeah,
that is really analogous to the experience a lot of photographers have in terms of, deciding to whether or not they're going to get up early to
mm,
get
mm,
that good light, or whether they're going to, stop the car in order to make the image that you described. Or,
mm,
when you're driving around, you see a scene and you say, "I'll get back to it," and instead go, "No, I'm going to stop now and make this photograph because it's just not going to be there." Like for example, there's an image of a blue old pickup truck
yeah, yeah,
there, and I had been driving past that location a couple of times, and I was noticing the pattern of the light on that green wall.
mm.
And then this one day, I was just like, I'm not passing it up. Right? And that day, that blue truck happened to be there.
Oh, brilliant.
I went and I probably worked that scene for about 10 minutes before
Mm,
the light was gone.
mm.
In the subsequent days, the truck was never there again.
Wow. So
And
yeah, for the sake of the listeners, Ibarionex has sent me a bunch of photos, and I'll put this into the blog post, which will be at mbp.ac/502. So you can you'll be able to check that out. That is just in the US, right? That's in LA.
yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Or
I,
for people familiar with Los Angeles, it's just west of downtown Los Angeles in an area called Westlake.
okay,
There's a park there called MacArthur Park. So it's probably with no traffic, only about 8 or 9 minutes from downtown Los Angeles.
wow. When I opened this your file of photos this morning, I thought perhaps it was Cuba or something like that, because they've got a lot of old cars over there. But yeah, this is great. I love the textures and just the light that you're working with here. And I can see in the photos that you've sent. I'll share a whole bunch of these in the blog, just so that people can see where you're at with your work. But I can see that you've got a certain amount of experimentation going on here, and although it still feels very much like the Ibarionex that I know, I also do see a lot of experimentation here that I can feel that upswing that you were talking about.
Hmm.
So earlier you mentioned the techniques that you use to overcome. I think it was I've got a note that I made earlier. I've got the word fear and I've got the word technique.
Yeah.
What do you do to actually overcome that fear of approaching people? For me, I know that for me the fear of now is stronger than ever. The fear of walking away without the photo is probably greater than the fear of actually going up and approaching that person. And I'm not sure if that might be something that I've heard you say before. How do you drive yourself to overcome the fear?
But one of the things that I'm doing right now with my stuff in Westlake is I'm not really approaching people.
Mm,
And what I'm doing is I'm making myself a fixture on the street. And one of the things that I've been doing is I've been one of the things that I frequently do is I'll stop at a street corner
mm,
at a curve. So I'll have this two sidewalks
mm,
coming from my right and one coming to my left. So I got people coming from both directions. Right. So I'm right at the corner,
mm,
say a corner of a building.
mm,
So people are coming from moving along both directions there. And the curb there is the crosswalk where people are crossing the stream.
mm,
So it's a really busy corner.
mm,
I'm there and people can see me from a distance
mm,
as they're walking in that direction. right?
Mm.
So when they see me, they already see me making photographs. So they're not thinking that I'm making photographs of them.
I see.
But I'm very aware of who's coming up and down the street.
Mm.
So that being said, what I'm doing is I've already looked at what is happening at the corner. There are already some vendors that are there at the corner. I'm aware of the color of the wall. I'm aware of the color of the light. I've already sort of figured, okay, what's my overall frame going to be here?
Mm.
What's my setting? What's my background going to be? All of that stuff I've sort of figured out.
Mm.
So as these people start coming in, I start sort of moving and jockeying my position, sort of doing this little dance and waiting for people to walk into my frame. And I'm especially waiting for them to get really physically close to me.
Mm.
Because I'm using 28, they're usually on the periphery of my frame, but sometimes they're so close to me that I can touch them
Mm.
and I can make the photograph. But over and above that, I'm not just aware about this singular person, I'm also aware of the person coming from the left, the person coming from the right, the person that's right behind them.
Mm.
Um, I'm trying to time it so that all of these different elements that are moving within the frame suddenly happen. Like there's an example of an image with a guy with a cane that I submitted to you.
Mm.
Okay, so what initially drew my attention there, and this isn't at that street corner, but it's relatively close to there.
Mm.
So, but my first reaction to that scene was the red tiles and the white tiles.
Mm.
And I went, oh, that's an interesting contrast. And then I saw the white sort of shade in the windows, and oh, that's pretty good. That's kind of interesting. And so I made some frames just with that.
Mm.
Then I noticed that there was an umbrella hanging on the security gate to the window, and I went, oh, okay, that's good. And I made some shots that were basically abstract shots, and then I started pulling sort of further back, and then I started sort of building that overall frame. And I said, well, let me include a little more of the sidewalk, and then I started having people, moving in front of the frame.
Mm.
And I kept shooting and shooting and shooting, and then this frame happened where I had this fellow with a cane moving towards the right of the frame, and I have these two other women moving towards the left. And I made that shot, and that shot has all those things that I've been talking about.
Mm. Yeah.
One thing, the one flourish that I didn't see the moment I made the photograph was the fact that this man's cane mimics the handle of the umbrella in the background.
It's exactly the same angle, isn't it? It's like
Right. Exactly.
yeah.
It's just the same
Color.
shape, angle,
Yeah.
and it just made the shot. But he's really close to me. I mean, I could reach out and sort of touch him.
Mm.
But that's the kind of stuff that I'm trying to do. I'm not just trying to create images that have depth to them. That's always been a sort of a goal of mine. But it's just about being able to anticipate that moment where you're having all this sort of chaos
Mm.
that's happening around me, and I'm basically trying to go, how much of all this craziness can I put together in a frame and still make it work?
Mm. Mm.
Because for the longest time, what I would do is I would just like throw stuff out.
Yeah.
I would just eliminate stuff from the frame and try to make as simple and clean a composition as I could.
Mm.
And I'd gotten really good doing that. And I could make some really nice abstract photographs, some nice street photographs, in which I was basically practicing minimalism.
Mm.
But I got sick and tired of doing that. And it's like, how about if I throw more stuff in?
Yeah.
Which is completely went against what I knew was easy for me to do.
Mm.
I could work in that minimalist form and know that I could come away with a really good photograph.
Mm.
But I didn't want to keep doing that. I didn't want to keep repeating myself over and over and over again that way. I think that's one of the reasons I'd gotten frustrated. So part of my fear, part of my anxiety was like, oh, can I pull it off?
Yeah.
Good enough am I as good a photographer as I think I am that I'll be able to pull this off? And so when I make shots like this, I feel like, oh, okay, yeah, I'm getting there. I'm seeing and I'm practicing in a way that I'm able to make. I'm on the path to making that. So
I can relate to that. I mean, I can relate to a number of things there, and one is that I still, for me, I find it very important to illuminate. I often say that good photos are about what you leave out or what you eliminate from the frame, almost as much, if not more importantly, than what you include. But you're throwing the gauntlet down to yourself. You're giving yourself a challenge of including more, and that's certainly. I mean, that's a scary thing to do. But looking at this and looking at your recent work, I can see that that's starting to pay off. And I I remembered as you were talking there, why I wrote the word technique down in this little bullet list that I was putting together as you spoke, and it was about you'd mentioned about a technique for photographing without people thinking that you're photographing. And
Yeah.
looking at the height of the camera in this photo with the wall and the canes and the person, well, the three people, you've got the camera at like waist or hip height.
Right.
So is that what you're doing? Are you actually lowering the camera down? Are you using the articulated screen and things like that?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that I'm doing it.
Okay.
So I found that and I'm not doing it because I don't want people to think that I'm taking a photograph, because it's very obvious that I am there making photographs.
Mm,
So it's not that people think I'm doing something else. It's not that. It's that I like the perspective
mm.
from shooting at waist level.
Yeah.
Because even when I used the camera with a viewfinder, I was occasionally, getting physically down,
Mm,
get that perspective sometimes. This is just makes it that much more convenient for me
mm.
to be able to do it. Because I like the way things are looking when I move the camera down when I'm not at eye level.
Yeah. Well, the thing that strikes me about this photograph is that it doesn't even feel. It feels as though the photograph's been made from somewhere where there is nobody. That normally when you shoot at eye level, you can tell that it's coming from you're there with the camera at eye level. But with
Mhm.
this photograph, it's like it's as though the camera is just suspended in midair. I don't get the feeling that it's someone with a camera. I get a feeling that it's a slice of time from daily life of these people, these three people, and their environment. And so it kind of removing you from the end result.
That's
And
interesting.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but apart from that's an egotistical way to look at it. But I think the end result is quite striking because it really does. It feels as though it's just the camera suspended in midair, and that's appealing. So I like the direction that you're taking this.
Yeah, I like that observation.
Hmm. So do you do anything else? You mentioned earlier your gear. You've got the Samsung and the Fuji. Um, do you have any sort of other limitations on, I mentioned like a 50 millimeter, you said you were shooting with the 28 to 35. Um, is there anything else that you do to push this kind of photography? I guess, if that's the only kit you're using, then there are limitations that come from that. But, is there anything there that you feel is helping to increase the appeal of this work?
Uh, I think it's it. I just got the small flash
Mm,
on Samsung. I put that on there because I really kind of curious as to how images will look if I was using a little flash on the street, and I just started doing that.
mm.
Just started playing around with trying to find working with the settings. How much do I need to reduce the output of the flash in order to get the look that I'm going for? Um, I've usually used the Fuji in the silent mode, which automatically cancels the flash,
Mm,
and actually enabling it now. And so that's one thing that I'm going to be adding to the mix:
mm.
the use of the flash, um, just to see what happens. I mean, I'm not going to go full Bruce Gilden uh, at any point. I'm going to get into people's faces and
Mm,
and flash them. That's not what I'm into. But I'm really curious as to um, what I can bring out in terms of color and tone by using the flash. Because one of the realities that I'm facing is that because I'm often photographing around noon, is the quality of the light is overhead. So sometimes I'm contending with some really strong shadows.
Mm,
Not so much right now, just because of the nature of the weather and such. But I'm doing with it. I'm dealing with it occasionally, and I was really curious. Would the flash be able to help me much with that?
mm,
And because I'm using it in the daylight, most people the light from the flash is not gonna people are not gonna react to it as they would if I was shooting flash at night or indoors, where
mm.
it's really obvious. When you're outdoors in the daytime, the flash is almost invisible.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm gonna play with that to see how that will it enhance my pictures. I don't know if I'm committed to it at this point, but that's something that I'm doing every time I go out there. Is I have the flash enabled,
Mm,
and when I'm working, I'm having it shoot. But I haven't shot anything so far that has really confirmed. Oh yeah, this is a path I want to continue to go. I'm still playing around with that, but
mm.
it's part of what you mentioned earlier is this experimentation
Yeah.
that I'm willing to do that I don't think I was willing to sort of embrace before because I was so locked in with the outcome. So with
Mm,
so much of my photography, I have to come away with a great photograph.
mm,
That's the only way this spending 3 hours roaming around shooting is going to be worthwhile is if I come away with some great photographs
mm,
and kind of let that go. So now I'm being more playful, more experimental, being willing to come back with nothing
mm.
and be okay with that.
And that's big. I mean, that's something that I think, and that takes a lot of guts, because I think that as photographers, once we get a certain amount of the technique down, and our creativity is where we want it to be, I think we need those confirmations that we're still doing it to sort of validate what we're doing, and you're essentially throwing that out, and I think that that takes a lot of guts, but I can see from your work that it really is starting to pay off. So
Yeah.
I'm looking through your images, and there's one of a guy in a room with a blue wall behind him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about this. This is a little bit different. You're obviously there, and you're in this one. I can feel you in front of him here. Tell me
Yeah.
about this.
I was at a men's retreat earlier this year,
Hmm.
and this was early in the morning, and I'd gotten up early to take a walk, and I walked into the room before the event had started,
Hmm.
and I saw this light coming through this wall, and I went, "Oh, that's just really lovely light." And there was a chair there, and so I just started playing with making an image of the chair, and then my friend walked in, and I said, "Hey,
Come
come
over
over."
here.
And I just started just making the photograph, just trying to take advantage of the light. And I was just like moving him around, moving my, changing my composition from horizontal to vertical, talking to him, keeping him engaged, and because again, it was just I saw the light, I saw the setting, and I wanted to do something with it. The chair wasn't making it happen.
Hmm.
It was like, okay, it's good, but it needs something else. And then, the photo god sent my friend in,
Hmm.
and I started making the photograph. And this is one of those images where I did make some changes to it because the color of the light was overall warmer.
Hmm.
But using Lightroom, I actually made the space around them a little cooler. So
Hmm.
you get that contrast between warm and cool.
Hmm.
But I really like the portrait of him.
Mm, it
And,
is great,
uh,
great photo, great character, and listening to your backstory there, I can sense again. You're building the photograph. You just went through the steps, the building blocks that went into putting this together. So yeah, I mean that sense of building your photographs that you mentioned earlier is coming through again.
yeah, because I'm working basically a photo essay at the place where I'm working.
Mm,
I'm doing sort of a photo story on what it's on the work environment there and the people working together and all this other stuff and all the same stuff I've been talking about is playing a role there.
mm,
And
mm,
photographs are very different from the stuff that I'm doing on the street but
mm.
I'm putting to practice everything that I'm talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
Taking things apart, putting them together, trying to make everything work within the context of the frame. And I'm really slowly building this body of work with the intention of doing something. I want to put together a little book by the time my time there is over.
Mm.
Um,
I can almost see, if not something similar to what your previous books, I can almost see like a coffee table book called Lunch Breaks or something like that. Yeah, just a this is what I did over the case
yeah,
over this period of a year or two or whatever, and just sort of putting out, because as art, it's right there and it's very you. So yeah, I'm looking now at the photograph of the guy in the blue hat. Um,
yeah,
Obviously, very much about the color, with the hat centralized there. But of course, you mentioned earlier about you've always been aware of depth in your photographs, and you've obviously, you've got this whole scene of the people working in, looks like a cafe, a restaurant,
yeah.
or a deli or whatever. I mean, tell us a little bit about this photo. What were you, what was going through your mind as you set this up and everything?
Well, I was teaching a workshop through LICP.
Mm,
We were going to the Central Market, which is this big market that has all these restaurants and vendors. It's really sort of the central part of downtown Los Angeles.
mm,
And we were walking across the street, and I saw this guy with the hat.
mm,
I went, "Oh wow, yeah, he'd be great, make a great photograph."
mm,
I had a group around me, and I was, trying to be uh, sort of wrangle everybody so we could get there. And then I had everyone just shoot in this place for about 20 minutes, and I was making my way to the other end of the market
mm,
when I passed by this restaurant, and I saw the guy with the hat that I'd noticed before having lunch, sitting down to lunch. And I was, oh, great! So I could actually make a photograph.
mm,
So I really loved the blue hat, and I
mm,
loved the quality of the light that was coming overhead and hitting him,
mm,
and sort of the warm artificial light that was illuminating the restaurant workers that were in front of him.
mm,
And so I, again, was starting playing around with the frame. Where do I put them? Do I put them in the center? Do I put them slightly lower? Do I higher? Do I raise the camera up? Do I lower it? I was doing all those things. And when I finally settled on my frame, I just started paying attention to the workers behind them, because they were constantly moving
mm,
and changing within the frame. And I was just waiting for a moment where one of the workers was doing something interesting, giving me just the right gesture that would help sort of complete the frame.
mm.
Knew that I was like 90% there. The one critical flourish that would really make the shot was having someone in that background
Yeah.
do something interesting. And during that whole time, I'm in this aisle, so people are moving in front and behind me.
Mm,
So I'm constantly having to jockey with people sort of getting in my way, and sort of, but trying to stay aware of what's happening, my frame, and just sort of holding my position.
mm.
All this stuff is happening around me, so that when the right moment happened, I was ready for it.
Yeah. Wow. So the color, the striking color, is probably part of what attracted you to all of that. I like the way the composition sort of puts the hat in the middle, and that's one of those things that people that getting started are going to have learned that's taboo. Don't put things in the middle of the frame. But I think that there are times, and this is definitely one where that is really maybe not the only way to do it, but it's a very strong composition. It's like saying to someone, "This is what you're going to look at," but then your background with the people in the doing their job is definitely a great way to support that. And it's as though the guy's sitting there just watching them doing their thing. So there's a lot of great stuff to focus on in that photo.
And the frames that came before and after, I mean, there are some frames in which he is not in the center of the frame.
Mm,
He's center. He's off to the left. He's off to the right. Because I was experimenting in that moment, that they're trying to figure it out.
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I think it's one of the reasons I tell my students, is like, work the scene, work it. Don't just take one or two pictures and walk away.
Mm,
You're just getting started.
yeah,
You
yeah.
really have to just commit to it and just exhaust all the possibilities, because you're not likely to find the shot just by making one frame. It's just, there may be some freakish people out there that
Mm,
are able to do that brilliantly, I don't know anybody personally who can do that. You might be able to come away with a great photograph every once in a while, but as
Mm,
in terms of being able to produce consistently,
mm,
sorry, I think that you have to be really aggressive about working everything out
mm,
and taking it apart and putting it together and trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to make this work? And even if you don't make it work, if you shot 30 frames and it still didn't work, when you take a look at those photographs later and you start analyzing them and really critically evaluating them, you should get to the point where you can identify why it didn't work.
mm, mm,
Next time that you have a similar circumstance, you'll have that in your memory banks and you'll realize, oh, when I had a similar scene like this, the reason it didn't work, it was A, B, and C. So now that I have another opportunity to shoot something similar, let me make sure I don't make those same mistakes, make some different choices so that I can make it work.
mm, mm,
And shooting all of those frames that provide you that information, even if you failed the initial time. But if you only make one shot and it doesn't work and you don't evaluate the image to that degree, you'll never learn. You'll
mm.
never figure out what you're doing wrong or what you're doing right. And you'll go out there and you'll keep making these pictures and you'll keep going, I don't know why I suck as a photographer. And part of it is that you're just being lazy.
Mm,
That's not to be mean or anything, but I think that there's a certain laziness that's inherent to a lot of photography that's out there,
mm.
and I think part of it is made all the worse by this fixation on the fact that this equipment and this software is going to be the remedy to it,
Oh,
and
for sure. Yeah.
it's not. The only reason why photographers get better is because they shoot, they shoot, they shoot, they shoot.
Yeah.
And they look at the pictures and they analyze it and they don't get fixated on whether people are going to like the picture or not. I mean,
Mm,
that's wonderful, but at some point when you really get serious about it, you really have to be your own worst critic and but not just say, "Oh, this sucks and this is great and am I wonderful?" It's like, what am I trying to do?
mm.
And I think that only comes from staying committed to building a body of work and learning how to edit, which of course is a whole new conversation.
Mm. Oh, for sure. I mean, people do often become a little bit lazy, and yeah, the whole feeling that you can shoot anything and then you just fix it later is probably damaging a lot of people's work, and that's an important thing for people to think of. You know, you took a step back and challenged yourself, and I think that there are certainly things that everyone can take away from that. Just to take a look at our own photography and think whether or not we are in a similar place where we need to step back and say, okay, I've got to stop doing this because it's making me lazy. Am I relying on the processing? You know, if you're relying on a certain type of processing to save your images every time you go out with the camera, then maybe there's a challenge that you need to throw down to yourself as well.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I I've got to ask this one last photograph. You sent me a bunch of great images, but there's the guy with the big orange fairy wings or butterfly wings on his back. You got to tell me the story of this one. What's happening here?
Well, they had a on Halloween this year. They
Mm,
had Stan Lee's Kamikaze, which is sort of a comic book convention that
mm,
they have here. It's kind of like Comic Con, but
mm,
at a much smaller scale.
mm,
And my brother is part of a mech club, and it's a club of people who make robots,
mm,
largely inspired by Star Wars and other films. And he had built an R2 unit
mm.
from scratch, so he has a working R2 unit that
Wow.
uh, remote controls. And he actually, as an aside, he got to meet Mark Hamill recently at Children's Hospital for an event, and I was
Oh, brilliant.
very jealous. But anyway, he was going to be at a booth at this event, and then I went to attend,
Mm,
and there was just it's Halloween, so there was just a whole bunch of people there in full costume.
mm,
Doing this cosplay stuff, and of course, I took a picture there. I took pictures there, but I wasn't completely happy. I mean, it was just so much. It was so much visual noise
mm,
that it was hard for me to sort of process everything to the point that I could think about it photographically.
mm,
So I came away not thinking I'd gotten much of anything, and I'm walking towards to my car, which was several blocks away, because they were having some sort of game at the Staples Center and they had this event. So parking was insane. I mean, if you wanted to park across the street, they were asking like $50.
Mm.
There's no way I'm going to pay $50 for parking. I'm sorry.
No.
So I had to park a good distance away to get a reasonable rate. So I'm crossing the street. It's a late afternoon, and I see this guy with these butterfly wings. I don't know what kind of costume it was, but I see this guy, and I go, "Oh, that's kind of interesting." And the light hits the edge of his wings. Like, oh, and in my initial shots with him, there was just too much busyness. There was just these other people on the street corner, and I made a couple of frames, and I went, it's not working.
Mm.
And I just kind of put my camera down, but we kept walking in the same direction. About 2 or 3 blocks later, I'm seeing him, and he's a good distance away from me now, and I see this red kiosk.
Oh, yeah.
The distance. I'm seeing the light that he's about to walk into. It's an ATM.
Mm.
I see the light hitting the yellow post, and there's a fire hydrant there, and I start running. Start moving, because he's not in the position where he's in the photograph, but I know he's walking in that direction.
Mm.
So I realize I have to make up that distance between me and him, so I can be the right distance between me and him, and be prepared to be able to make the photograph. So this frame, as compared to the other ones, is a lot cleaner. I mean, it's very busy. I mean, there's signage there, there are cars, there are people at a taco truck on the edge, but it was a much better frame than what I had initially done. So I managed to get into the right position, and I had 2 frames. Just basically got into position and waited for him to sort of, be in mid-step, make this shot just as the light was hitting the tip of his wings.
That's a great story. Great anticipation. You see those elements and then got yourself ready for it. But the orange wings, it's not the same, but it almost it's close to the red in the ATM there, and the yellow, the splashes of yellow, the posts, his boots, his shorts, and then looks like he's carrying a bucket or something that's yellow as well, and then the fire hydrant. It all pulls. It's busy, yes, but it all pulls together nicely with all of the elements and the way it's all tied together. So,
and I like this picture because it works despite all the noise.
Yeah, and I think the noise is what makes it. It's
very true.
Yeah, it's very nice.
But it goes back to being this so antithetical to how I would have made shots before, right? Where I would be trying to sort of simplify things and not include all this busyness, just because I felt it would be a distraction. It's like, that's the challenge. Can I take something as noisy as this and find a way of making it work?
Yeah, I think you are. It's working well.
So if I can I think this image is probably representative of what I'd like to be able to do more consistently. I'm glad that I was able to recognize the potential of that moment. That's something that really pleases me more than the satisfaction I get from that specific frame.
Well, that's a nice. It's a good one of those like feather in your cap, or what? Well, not so much a feather in your cap, but the fact that you seem to be getting the satisfaction from those sort of aspects, as opposed to where you would have got the satisfaction from getting your. We talked earlier about you go out for a certain amount of time, you've got to come back with a great image for that. I think you are getting great images, but I think that the satisfaction might be coming from different aspects from what they were in your old work. So
the fact that it's different is really, really satisfying, and I'm able to make them work. But I have to admit that I'm still nervous, because it's like I think probably maybe every photographer goes through this, but there's a point where you feel like, I think I'm really good, and you just want photographs that reinforce that, right? And I
Wow.
think I probably have this very high mark for myself just because I take in so much great photography as a result of the show,
Mm.
and the books that I constantly look at. I mean, I just looked got Mark Cohen's new book, who's a amazing street photographer.
Mm.
And I look at that work, and my jaw just drops. And a lot of the stuff he's made over, 60s and the 70s and the 80s, and real classic photography. And I take a look at that work, and my jaw just drops.
Mm.
Just the
Yeah.
way he's seeing, and I go, God, I want that. I want to be as good as that. But that being said, this is 30 or 40 years worth of work, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm not making a really fair comparison between me and him,
Mm.
comparing myself to his greatest work. But nevertheless, I look at that work, and that aspirational thing
Mm.
is first and foremost in my head. Can I, after taking all these photographs, by next summer, will I be able to edit this stuff into 20 or 30 images that I can walk away and feel like I've really accomplished something, that I've hit a new level in terms of what I'm able to do.
Mm.
I won't know, but the idea that I may fail at this by the time I get there really makes me anxious, because I'm kind of going, have I hit the limits of what I'm capable of as a photographer?
Mm. Yeah.
And I think it's something I'm willing to explore, but I'm really hoping that by the time I reach that I will have achieved that, and that I'll recognize it.
Mm.
But it's a little nerve wracking to not know. But I'm sick and tired of playing it safe as well. So
Yeah. Well, you're making yourself vulnerable, but a lot of good stuff can come from that, and it looks as though it is, and it already is. So it's great to sort of jump in with you and talk about this in the middle of it, because you still are in that place where you're feeling anxious and vulnerable. So maybe when you get to the end of this and you've edited your set down, we can jump back on a call and reflect and see how it all came out in hindsight.
that'll be great.
Yeah. Well, I'm aware that we've been talking for an hour now, and I know that you've got plenty of other stuff to do, so we'll start to wrap this up. But it's been incredible speaking with you today, Ibarionex. And can you tell people where they can find you?
They can go to thecandidframe.com, where I do my interview show, which will be celebrating 10 years next year. And
10
it's
years.
conversations with some of the best established and emerging photographers. I mean, I talk to photographers of all genres, of all experience levels, just amazing, talented people producing some amazing work. Some people that you've heard of, no doubt, but also some people that you otherwise haven't heard of, but who have amazing photographs to share and stories to tell. And if you're really into photography and not just into tech and gear, and you really want to draw some inspiration from all the various ways that people make photography a part of their lives, then take a listen to the show. I have apps available on both Windows, Mac iOS, and Windows 8. So you can access the complete archive of shows, over 300 episodes, right off of your tablet or phone. But you can also stream episodes directly at the website at candidframe.com.
Excellent. Well, I can't imagine that many people have not already listened, but if they haven't, I've been listening since Ibarionex started, and every one of his shows is worth listening to. There's always plenty of takeaways, and like I said earlier, you seem to get some incredible guests. So I can't recommend your show more. So. Well, really, thanks very much, Ibarionex. It's always a pleasure, and I hope we get a chance to talk again pretty soon.
We will. It's always a pleasure to talk to my man in Japan.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Wow, it was such a pleasure to talk with Ibarionex again. And as I said earlier in the middle of that, I have linked to a number of photographs that Ibarionex sent me in the blog post. And there's links as well to a few of the things that we discussed. So you can go over and check that out at mbp.ac/502. The Zone System podcast that I talked about last week will probably be here next week now. I just wanted to share this with you, especially with Christmas coming up. So if you celebrate Christmas, have a happy one, and I will see you again next week. Thanks very much for listening today. If you enjoy this podcast, please share a link with your friends. And if you don't already, please subscribe in iTunes or your favorite podcast program to ensure uninterrupted delivery. You can find me on Google+, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and links to everything that I'm up to are at martinbaileyphotography.com, so do drop by and take a look. I'll be back next week with that follow-up episode, but in the meantime, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, take care and have a great week, whatever you're doing. Bye-bye.